Hello, welcome to the Horti-Culturalists. I'm Matthew Lucas.
And I'm Stephen Ryan.
And we post a video every week on a Friday, so do hit subscribe if you want to know what exciting adventures we're on every week.
And don't forget our Monday shorts. So if you've got a gardening question you'd like to ask me that I know Matthew will read out with aplomb, put it in the comments below, tell me where you're from for context, and we'll get round to answering it on Mondays.
We will indeed. I'm also, though, seeing, Stephen, talking of questions, a beautiful location.
Oh, yes.
What's going on? Where are we?
All right, we're at Burnley Horticultural College.
Yeah.
It's a campus of Melbourne University, and we're coming here to do a whole series of stories, but today I want to just walk the garden and look at some of the really amazing plants that they're growing here, things that have sort of caught my fancy and hopefully things that will catch yours.
Well, there's already some amazing things that have caught my fancy, and I think one of the things about this garden is it's beautiful.
Yeah.
The design, the things that are in it are just beautiful, and often teaching gardens and institutions aren't built around aesthetics.
No, well, you have seen the occasional system garden where
Yeah.
there are sort of
Right,
blocks
right.
and things. It might be a really useful teaching tool, but it's not exactly the most beautiful of things.
This is a beautiful place. We'll put the website below. It's open to the public. It's the most gorgeous garden. And also too, if you're interested in seeing what's on the academic horizon here,
Yep.
the website there will also take you down that path if you're interested in finding out more about studying here at Burnley.
The next Baron von Mueller might come about.
Yes, indeed, indeed. But I think let's just dive right in and go and do our greatest hits of Burnley tour.
Yes. Oh, I'm looking forward to this.
Okay.
Let's go. Well, Matthew, a grass. I have to say I'm becoming more and more grassified.
Well, we have our beautiful grass video at Antique Perennials, the
Yes.
grass hedge, and this caught both our eyes.
Yes, now this is an Australian native one, unlike most of the ones we saw up at Antique Perennials Nursery, and it goes under the name of Stipa ramosissima, although it might be Austrostipa. There's been a few serious name changes in these grasses, and this one is an evergreen grass that comes from basically all the eastern states and including Lord Howe Island, and it grows in moist but well-drained sites along gullies and things like that in its natural habitat, generally in semi-shade. And I think it's gorgeous.
It is.
It flowers almost year-round in a mild climate. If you look at it carefully, you can see how on the stems you've got an old flower head, and then you've got younger flower heads on the one stem.
Yeah.
So you can see the original flower spike is just there. So that's the first one that developed on this stem. Then if we look further down the stem, you can see one there that's actually just opened. And then finally, there is a young one there that's still quite green that hasn't even started to open up properly. So you've got 3 flower spikes all on the one plant, all coming out consecutively, so that encourages the plant to do its best for as long as possible. So it will go on for months and months and months. It'll probably still look quite presentable right through the winter, and then you'd probably cut it back a bit hard and encourage a whole pile of new growth for the following year. So lovely grass, and as you can see, reasonable height. You know, well, I'm not so sure I'm all that tall, but anyhow, it's as tall as I am, so it's not bad going, really.
Medium.
Yes, yes.
And its common name is bamboo grass, and it has formed these beautiful little like miniature bamboo clumps.
Yes, it has that sort of bamboo-esque quality about it. So it's a lovely grass. So I'm quite taken with this one.
Me too.
You know, if I had a spade.
Well, we can't exit through the gift shop because there isn't one, but I'm sure you can find one.
Yes, I'm sure this plant will be available somewhere for me if I want to plant one in the garden at home.
Okay. Well, Stephen, we haven't got very far.
No, just round the corner.
One of the things that I love is this planting here, and it's very simple in terms of what's been chosen, but it's the colour blocking, and I'll drop in pictures so you can see, but there's the most beautiful range of greys and purples.
It's wonderful. All growing in really dry conditions, in semi-shade, and it's a mixture of things. The main specimens are the silver foliaged Cotyledon, which is a quite common succulent plant. And of course the purple Tradescantia pallida that's growing down at the far end, which I've got an awful feeling's had a name change, but I can't remember. But anyhow, I've known it since childhood as Tradescantia pallida, with its dark purple foliage and its pink flowers on it. Just beautiful.
And there's aloes about to come into bloom, and purple aeoniums on the other side. I think the most famous variety is called Schwarzkopf, isn't it?
It
The
is,
totally
yes.
black one. I'll drop all those pictures in. But back to that point about beauty here. So there are so many moments in this garden where it's just aesthetic pleasure. It's not about science and botany and horticulture. It's just the
Although
pure design beauty.
I'm sure that sneaks in somewhere. They must make use of all these plants in a scientific and botanical way somehow.
All right. Well, let's go on and find something you like.
All right, good idea. Well, I have to say, Matthew, that's one of my favourite foliage plants I can't grow. So unfortunately up at Macedon we're too frosty for it. It's a thing called Bocconia frutescens. It's commonly known as tree celandine, or at least that's one of the multitude of common names. And it's a foliage plant par excellence. You cut it back like you would a tree dahlia, so you bring it down to a stump every year after the frost and cold are over, and it will grow up to 4 metres or more tall in the growing season, and those fabulous big leaves. And I might add, the flowers are nothing to write home about. And it has become weedy in some parts of the world, so like most plants, if they're in the right conditions but in the wrong habitat, they can be a problem. And apparently it's quite an environmental pest in Hawaii, but I don't live in Hawaii, so I don't see any reason why I shouldn't have it.
Sorry to make you squat down, Stephen.
Yes, and I'm getting older and older and older. But anyhow, we'll deal with these things as we go along. But this caught your fancy, I know.
Yes.
And it's a plant that people love, and it's a plant that some people hate. And it's Gloriosa lily, Gloriosa superba. And it's a small genus, about 12 species. Has a weird distribution from tropical Africa right through Asia, and it has become naturalised and in some cases weedy in places like Indonesia, Australia. It has become naturalised in certain parts of Australia where it's become somewhat weedy. But it is a stunningly beautiful flower. It's reasonably easy to grow if you're in a basically frost-free environment. Doesn't like me at Macedon. I've killed it several times.
Yeah.
And of course the tubers that it dies down to have to be kept fairly dry during their dormancy period. And it's a sort of a scandent, semi-climbing tuberous plant. So it dies down and comes back again every year, and the flowers of course are beautiful and they pick quite well. So if you're looking for something as a cut flower, it's really pretty, and it's got a really exotic look about it. So
it really
I think
does.
it's lovely.
It's extraordinary. And this is quite a dry, sort of sunny corner, and it's obviously thriving. Not weedy in Victoria.
No, it's further north where you get up into the tropics that it starts to become a problem, and therefore probably best not planted and encouraged. But it is a beautiful flower, and it's any wonder it's become a popular garden plant.
And also relatively easy to grow in pots, because I grow the flashier one, Rothschildiana, in that pot. And as long as you keep it dry at the right time, easy to grow in a pot. And I actually saw this one growing wild in Bali last year, and I was quite stunned. I thought, what's that doing there? And then discovered, it's kind of gone a bit berserk in Bali.
And certainly in cold climates, growing it in a pot, you can then put it outside during the summer months where you can appreciate it. Then you can shelter the tubers indoors in the cellar or in the garage or wherever else you have to manage them. And you could keep them going for years.
Stunning thing. I know it's a problem in many places, but I think it's beautiful.
Doesn't hurt to be attractive, even if you are a weed.
Even if you're a pest.
Yes, that's right, exactly.
Well, Stephen, I think something both of us were stopped in our tracks.
Yes, most certainly. And it's something that we've engaged with before as well as a genus. And it's one of the Cussonias, the South African cabbage trees. This one I think is Cussonia spicata. You can see it's got wonderful flower spikes on it at the moment that are rattling with bees. And those big, intricate looking grey-green leaves and that really heavy trunk sort of look about it. It's a really, really gutsy looking tree.
It's extraordinary. I've never seen one so big.
Well, it's probably taller than the one at Melbourne University in the Cussonia court. But not as wide.
Quite something. And we made a Cussonia special with Lyle at Rorama Nursery.
Yes, we did indeed.
Beautiful. And interesting, his point too was that flower head, that whole branch
will die.
dies.
The
plant grows around it.
And in fact, you can see where the foliage is dropping off one up there. So that's getting ready to bloom. So you just wait until it decides where it's going to shoot from and then cut it back to there.
Very prehistoric looking flowers, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. They're weird things. Of course, they're in the Araliaceae family, which is another one of those groups of plants that I'm particularly fond of.
Yes.
Like many.
And not hardy, so not for the
Yeah,
cold.
no, there's one or two Cussonias that I can grow. I've got Cussonia paniculata in the garden at home.
Yeah.
That's fairly cold hardy. And Lyle did give me one of his others, which has survived 3 years in the garden, but it gets knocked down to the ground by frost every year.
Aha.
So maybe that's not going to turn out to be useful for me either.
All right, on to the next.
All right.
Oh, Stephen.
It's about time you found me somewhere to sit down, I have to say.
Oh my goodness, we have been schlepping around this garden. I must say though, it is so beautiful.
Oh, this is great. Great place to visit. And I am so pleased to be sitting under this tree. It's an Arbutus, and we did do a video specifically on the genus, so you could probably go back in and have a look at that if you wish to do so. And this one's a really interesting one. This is Arbutus andrachnoides, which is a hybrid strawberry tree, which has been found in the wild, so it can be a natural hybrid, but it's been found multitudes of times, and some of the individuals of this hybrid sort of are a little more like one parent or a little bit like the other parent. So it's not a static looking hybrid, it's dynamic due to the fact that it reoccurs time and time again.
Yeah.
It's a cross between what we in this country would rather weirdly call the Irish strawberry tree, Arbutus unido, and the Grecian strawberry tree. And I say weirdly with Irish strawberry tree because there's a small colony of it in Ireland that's thought to be natural, but it extends right through Spain, all over the place. The term Irish strawberry tree, you get laughed at if you go to Spain and say, oh, it's an Irish strawberry tree.
Like English oak?
Yes, well, it's all over Europe as well.
Which is all over Europe and all over Britain, not just England.
Yeah, so anyhow, common names are what they are.
Yeah.
Yes, common and somewhat misleading sometimes. But this has exquisitely beautiful bark, mainly inherited from the Grecian parent.
Grecian good looks.
Yes, it's got that wonderful look about it. The Irish strawberry tree, as we call it, unido, tends to have a rough brown bark of no particular merit. The tree itself can grow into a beautiful gnarly tree, but this hybrid is just lovely.
It's stunning. The bark is exquisite, and I must say, in our horticultural journey, bark never really figured in my imagination in terms of placement of a plant or considering it as a choice. But
yes,
obviously, the more you get attuned to it, the more you see the place that bark really has in the garden.
And if it happens to be a beautifully formed and shaped and sculptural tree at the same time, what could be better?
Yeah, what could be better?
Yeah, so there we go. Arbutus andrachnoides. Well, Matthew, I think this one caught your attention as we were walking around the corner.
I love this, and I'm always confused about its care, so I'm very glad it's in flower and we can talk about it. So first of all, tell us what it is.
All right, well, it's Haemanthus coccineus, the blood lily. Haemanthus, blood flower.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, and coccinea also means red or scarlet.
Yeah.
And it's a genus of mainly South African bulbs. I think there's about 22 species in the genus. Most of them are late summer or early autumn flowering. Many of them are deciduous, so they die down. This one is one of those, and its foliage is not there while it's in flower. So it's one of those sort of naked lady type bulbs that flowers without its leaves. The flowers come out in the late summer, early autumn. It seems to be happy in semi-shade right through to full sun, so it's not particularly fussy about aspect. Needs good drainage though, make sure it's got good drainage. And in our southern Victorian climate, you can more or less let nature take its course because its leaves don't start to come up till the rains start. And then the leaves stay there until such time as the rains stop. And our rains tend to be winter organised. So when it comes to natural rain, as long as it's actually out where it can get natural rain, you can generally let the plant just do its own thing. So you certainly don't want to water them when they're dormant in the summer. They don't seem to be oriented to the first rains for coming up and flowering. They just seem to do that. I think it's probably more due to the shortening of the days. And so you still don't water them. There's no sign of any leaf starting to form around that bulb yet, and you wouldn't give it any water until it started to show some leaves if it was then necessary, because the rains may well have set in.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary plant. The bulb is quite exposed too.
Yeah.
Now, in its natural habitat, a lot of African bulbs are stimulated or, even triggered or will only flower after fire. This has got an exposed crown though. So
yeah, no, look, this particular one, although I think it's got enough fleshiness about it that it'll probably cope with the fire quite well, it's not required in its normal growth cycle to be burnt over. other than having said, when you get a fire through, it will be inclined to clear a lot of brush and things away. So it allows more light and nutrients to get into the Haemanthuses. So the fire going through might be of benefit to them, but not directly. So that's how it would work.
Right.
And of course, when the leaves do come up, most people who've ever seen one of these in flower and not had the privilege of seeing the leaves, this particular one gets 2 leaves per bulb, and they're quite wide, and they come up and they lie across the ground like some sort of weird elephant's tongue or something like that. And it is a fabulous looking foliage plant as well, although the slugs and snails will play merry hell with it if you don't watch out.
It is amazing. And mine's in a pot, so it's also a bulb that you can grow in pot culture.
Oh yes, it doesn't care about being root bound.
The leaves are like a poor person's welwitschia, except
Yes.
they die every year.
Yeah, exactly. So there you go.
I love them.
Haemanthus coccineus, and as I said, there's 22 odd species. They're not all red. There's white ones, there's pink ones, there's a whole range of colours in the Haemanthuses. Some of them have these big petally-like bracts around the flowers, because the flowers are actually, if you look closely, that's an individual flower in there.
Oh, right.
So that's not a flower.
Right.
That's an inflorescence. So that's a cluster of flowers. So some have quite showy petal-like bracts around the outside like this Haemanthus has. Others are just the individual flowers without the big bracty bits.
Yeah.
So they do vary quite a bit visually.
Beautiful. Fabulous thing. And Stephen, something else that's caught my fancy. I love Plectranthus. So this is in quite a lot of shade. I mean, it's getting the very late afternoon direct sun, but just this color in shade. So I think that's the thing I love about this. Finding something that has bright colored flowers that loves shade ain't that common.
No, you tend to rely more on foliage plants for heavy shade. So the Plectranthus are fantastic from that perspective. I have to say most of them are somewhat frost tender.
Yeah.
I struggle with them. They never die, but they don't always flower every year because they just get into bud when we get our first heavy frosts. So it's once every 2 or 3 years I get them to flower reasonably well.
Yeah.
But down here in Melbourne where they don't get any frosts, the Plectranthus, I'm just trying to be a little posh there. They tend to start flowering in late summer and they'll go right through into the winter.
Beautiful things.
Great value plant.
Now, where is this one from?
Well, most of the Plectranthuses are African in origin, and I'm assuming ecklonii is as well. And you treat it as a soft-wooded shrub that you'd trim back like a perennial in the late winter, early spring, depending on your frost cycle. And then it'll all come up with this lovely fresh new growth and flower its head off. And this does come in a white form as well, which is lovely. And it does come in what I consider a rather murky pink, which I'm not overly fond of.
Yeah, no, I like the old school bright, strong purple.
Yeah.
Very easy to propagate from cuttings.
Oh, yes.
A little bit not dissimilar to salvias in its seed.
Yeah.
Of course, we have a great propagating salvia video with the wonderful Meg. So I would just follow the same principles, would you?
Oh, yeah,
in terms of propagating?
I mean, Plectranthus, I was
Plectranthus,
going to be
even,
posh again.
right.
They do, in fact, belong in the same family as the salvias, so they're in the Lamiaceae family.
Right.
They're related to coleuses as well, which
can
are
see that,
also
yeah.
a plant that's pretty easy to strike. You could sort of shove a cutting in a glass of water and generally get it to strike.
Yeah.
So they're a very easy group of plants. You could end up with lots and lots of it in your garden if that is your desire.
And there's lots of different ones, because there's a garden near me that there's a very low sort of ground covering one with very silver leaves. There's that Australian native one.
Yes, although I've got a funny feeling that's been
no
pulled,
longer Plectranthus.
Yeah, I think it's been pulled out and put into coleus or something like that, unfortunately.
Because we saw that at the Cranbourne Botanic Gardens, which we'll link when we did our video.
Yeah,
there,
so, but a great group of plants. I just wish more of them were growable in my climate.
Oh, well, they grow here.
Yes, exactly.
Well, Stephen, I've stopped here, and it is not, well, here in Australia, the world's rarest tree.
No.
It's the Moreton Bay fig tree.
Yes, Ficus macrophylla.
But-
and it is fabulous, though.
It is such a beautiful tree. Now, growing up in England as I did, The Jungle Book was one of my first feature films I remember seeing. This tree screams jungle to me.
Yeah, I get that. It sort of does, although I would have said more rainforest than jungle, where this comes from. But anyhow, of course, Ficus is a huge genus. There's masses and masses of them, which includes the commercial fig, also one of my favourites. And this particular one is loved by bats and birds and everything else around, and grows into an enormous canopied tree. Never a sort of really single trunky sort of tree as a rule. And of course it ends up with these enormous buttress roots that go out everywhere.
Yeah.
And quite regularly aerial roots that come down from the main limbs and branches. And there's one prepared earlier.
It is a glorious tree and comparatively hardy. So my mum used to live in the southwest of Western Australia, which gets regularly sub-zero, sub 32 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures and frosts. And near her house was a much larger, older property, and they had the most enormous Moreton Bay fig in the front garden, which was planted when the house was built in the 1880s. So it had managed to survive in what you'd say is a relatively cool, almost cold climate in Australia.
Yes, I'm not sure that it's quite for the gardens of London yet, but nonetheless.
It's also a big tree.
Yeah, well, it is a very big tree.
And where's it native to?
All right, well, it's native from central Queensland right down to New South Wales southern coast. So quite a broad band of habitat. But certainly it's one of the hardier figs, and it certainly makes a fabulous tree if you've got the right spot for it. I mean, in a park or garden of some size, it makes a very impressive tree. But because of its buttress roots and things that it sends out, it's not always a very convenient tree. You know, it's hard to mow around, things like that. So you've got to consider how you use a Moreton Bay fig.
So this one is planted on the edge of a border, and it's kind of become almost like the retaining wall of
It has indeed. It's a remarkable effect.
Yeah, a stunning tree. One of the many beautiful trees in this garden, not wildly uncommon or rare, but a great thing to see living its best life.
Yes, and sometimes it's about the individual, not so much the batch of a plant. So an individual can stand out on its own.
There you go. Well, there's quite a fragrance around here.
There is indeed.
Are we just near a toilet block?
No,
No.
we are not near. That's a dreadful thing to say. We are actually walking up to, and we'll soon pass, a rather large specimen of Osmanthus fragrans.
Well, let's go and have a look.
Yes.
So this is the thing about this garden. Often learning gardens, many levels of aesthetics aren't really included.
Yeah.
Fragrance being one of them. And we were just walking around this corner, this beautiful sort of limpid pathway.
Yes. And we were nearly bowled over, were we not?
Now, look at how insignificant that flower is.
Yes. Tiny, tiny little flowers.
What is it, Stephen?
That is Osmanthus fragrans. Now the
Fragrance by name.
Fragrant by nature. Now it comes in pure white forms through this sort of lemony yellow form to quite strong orange forms. Not that the flower colour matters that much because they're so tiny they don't actually make a visual impact in the garden particularly. The bush itself has fairly boring, bland looking green foliage.
It's not an extraordinary looking shrub at all.
No. In fact, you know, if you want it to look pedestrian, it does it rather well. But having said that, when the flowers are on it, and it flowers in the late summer into the early autumn, the perfume will just about lift you off your feet. It takes a little while for them to get big enough to start flowering. Yours truly actually holds the national collection of the Osmanthus genus.
Do you?
In my garden at home. I do indeed.
You've got a few national collections.
Yeah, I know. I just can't stop myself. But Osmanthus fragrans is so well thought of in Asia that in China they would build a pavilion from which to smell the Osmanthus, and it was also used to scent teas as well.
So it's native to China?
Yes, it's native to China and Japan, that sort of area. Probably extends down into Korea and some of the other parts of Asia. The genus itself is about 30 odd species, I think.
Yeah.
It extends, it's got a weird distribution. There's actually a New Caledonian Osmanthus. There's, you know, a number of different Asian ones that go right through Yunnan and China and all those areas. There's North American ones. So there's a range of Osmanthuses from quite a diverse area, not all of which are perfumed. So I might add, don't just assume because you're buying an Osmanthus that you're going to get scent. But certainly they're not lying when they named this one Osmanthus fragrans.
No, it is stunning. Hardiness, could it grow in a colder climate?
This one's not as hardy as some. It won't go down to terribly heavy frost, but there's a hybrid of this one called Osmanthus fortunii, which still has a wonderful fragrance to the flowers. They're white. The leaves are a bit bigger and probably a little bit bolder than fragrance, and it's a little bit more cold hardy. So if you want a scented Osmanthus in a colder climate, maybe opt for fortunii if you can find it.
And it's reminding me of winter sweet. I mean, completely different, but in terms of how inconspicuous the
Yeah.
flower is and how strong the fragrance is.
Yeah.
And we've made a winter sweet video, which we'll link.
Yes, exactly. And it does go to show that plants are quite clever. They'll put their eggs into whatever basket seems to suit them best, and you can't necessarily have a big showy flower and a highly strong fragrance.
No.
So,
Well,
yeah.
we were kind of sidetracked going to look at a design element of the garden, so we should probably carry on.
Oh yes, let's go and do that, and you can keep sniffing your Osmanthus as we go.
I will. And Stephen, lastly, a beautiful spot here at the garden.
And a nice spot to sit down.
Yes.
Appreciate the sound of water.
Tinkling water.
Yeah, what more could you want, really?
It's so beautiful. And a kind of a nod to Edna Walling, who is one of the more famous graduates, I guess, of the Burnley School.
She was certainly one of those whose name is still well known out there. So yes, she would definitely have to be up there in the higher echelons of the student fraternity in this particular college.
And we've made a couple of films about Edna Walling's gardens, which we'll link. And this bit just reminded me a bit of her with the stonework and the water.
Yeah, so there you go.
Stephen, I love this garden.
Yeah, it's great fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's one of those places that doesn't matter what level of horticulture you're at, you'll get pleasure from it. You can be the absolute rank amateur that doesn't know the first thing about plants, but you'll enjoy the setting.
Yeah.
You'll love the sweeping lawns. You'll adore everything about it. But then if you're at a different level where you've become something of a horticulturalist, there'll be plants here you haven't seen before, or bigger specimens than you think you've ever seen before. So there's always something for everybody in this garden.
And also the way things are put together and designed. I think one of the amazing things about Melbourne is it's very mild climate, so we basically don't freeze and don't get frosts.
Yes.
Which enables this vast array of plants from all over the world to cohabit. So it's so exciting to see that juxtaposition here.
And I think we might have to come back again because we saw a lot of interesting plants, and I just don't think there's enough time on this video to look at all of them.
No, and we'll put a playlist together of all of our Burnley films, and we are going to come back because there's such a breadth of knowledge here and expertise, so we want to come and tap into that.
Yes, exactly. And share it with all of you folk, of course.
So if you want to know what we're doing next week, though, you will have to hit subscribe because we do post every week on a Friday.
Yes, and don't forget our Monday shorts. If you want the answer to a gardening question that's been burning a hole in you, put it in the comments below, and on a Monday...
We'll put that fire out, that's what we'll
exactly.
do.
Well, we'll give you the answer at least. So tell me where you're from for context, and yes, on Monday we will get round to using them in our Monday shorts.
We will indeed. But until then, we look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye all.